In this video, we are going to be looking at modulation, and more specifically, some very kind of practical tips, especially if you're a beginner, to spice up your harmonies and kind of surprise your listener a little bit in your themes. So I'm going to focus on a few key things that I think are the most effective when you're starting out, and I'm not going to just bombard you with every single theoretical way that you can use modulation and just make you overwhelmed and confused. So we're going to be focusing on a few key areas. And the first example I want to look at is one of the themes that we wrote in the melody chapter. Because some of you might have noticed when I was playing through it before, some might not, but it's actually a modulation in here to a different key. Let's listen to it and see what I mean. Right here, what's happening there? I'm actually modulating to a different key. And to understand this, I just want to pull up the circle of fifths real fast, because that's going to be a really good reference point. So, in the beginning of this theme, let me just make sure I have piano. Yes, in the beginning of this theme, we're starting out in C major. Just going up and down and landing on C, but all of a sudden suddenly there's a bunch of black keys snuck into here, which means we have gone to a different key. So what exactly I'm doing here is I'm looking at the melody note just in the same way as we found the main keys for our melody. We got an F, and in C major, the only chords that have an F in it is D minor or F major. But there's other chords that have F in it as well, which is B flat major. And the reason for this is B flat major belongs to a neighboring key. So look at the circle of fifth, we have C major, but if we modulate one step to the left on the circle, we have F major. And F major has a lot of the same chords like D minor and C, but it also has B flat, because that's the subdominant, the fourth step. So what I'm effectively doing is that I'm using a note that exists in both keys, and I'm just smoothly modulating all of a sudden to F major by going to the B flat. And if this is confusing, just, let it sink in a little bit. Try to look at the different chords in each key. Look at the circle of fifths a few times, and hopefully it's going to become more clear what I'm talking about. But what I'm basically doing is that I'm modulating one step to the left on the circle of fifths to F from C. And an easy way to see this on a piano is to go 1/5 down. Boom. Or a fourth up. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can keep modulating like this. So another step on the circle of fifth to the left would be, as you see, B flat. And that's another fifth down here from the F. So that is a very smooth way to modulate a melody. And what's good about it is that it feels natural, but it also gives the listener a little bit of a surprise. It adds something new and fresh to the melody. It's not as predictable. So let's just listen to this once more and see what happens. Doesn't feel completely out of place, but it just adds different twist and a different kind of color to the theme. Now let's go ahead and look at a different theme that I made for this course that we're going to explore more in depth later, that also does something similar. Alright, so let's listen to this idea. The modulation is happening just about here, but I want you to listen to the whole thing just so we kind of establish the home key, which in this case is F. So we're starting at F, And now we're going to be modulating in this example to B flat major. All right, let's listen. Boom, there we have a modulation to a different key. We're suddenly in the key of B flat major, or it's actually G minor, but as you know, they are, the relative keys of each other. It's the minor version. So let me just kind of play the chords of this passage, and then we're gonna quickly analyze what's happening. All right, let's go down to the piano here and look at what exactly is going on here. So the first chords is just B flat major, D minor. So a basic D minor chord progression, and then we're landing on F. So depending how you see it, this is either in D minor or F major, as you see the relative keys. So, but then suddenly we have a C minor in here, and if we listen or play through the chords that's in D minor or F major, we have a C, but we don't have a C minor. It's a C major in this key. That means we must have modulated to a different key, because this is quite obviously a C minor chord. Now, if you look at a circle of fifths and I have modulated a fifth down from D, we suddenly find ourselves in G minor. And G minor, on the other hand, has C minor in it. Or if we're looking at it this way, the B flat major, the second step of that key is C minor, just as D minor is the second step of C major. We go in this key. So all of a sudden we have modulated to the neighboring key very effortlessly, very smoothly. You barely notice that it's there unless you know what's happening kind of behind the scenes. So I'm going from C minor to G minor. So all of a sudden we're in the key of G minor. So that's another little way that you can use these things. I've used this as a little contrasting break until we get to the kind of little finale here. So let's just recap that before I go to the next couple of little techniques that you can use. So we've been talking about modulating to the neighboring key on the circle of fifths, which is something that you can just practice. Do a lot of exercises with some of your existing themes, or just write some new themes or chord progressions and practice ways to just modulate on into the next key on the circle of fifths. Just get comfortable with how this works, because it's a very effective tool. Now, at the end here, there's another little kind of bonus thing that I want to show you guys. Let's listen to the end. So that final chord that really lifts the ending a little bit. We're going to dive into the actual project file and orchestration of this later. I just want to focus purely on harmony and the little modulation that's happening here. Just not to, use you with too many things. So the chords here are E flat major down to C minor And usually you'd go to G minor after that, like this. Because that's the chord that's in the key. We're in the key of G minor after all, so you would expect G minor to be the chord that we resolve to. But instead of going to G minor, I'm going to G major. So what it sounds like is this then. So there's a surprise major chord happening there. I'm resolving to G major instead of G minor. And, you know, there's not really any rocket science behind that. I just like to sometimes surprise the listener. And when I'm trying to achieve some kind of lift, some kind of very magical, uplifting moment, it's nice to, you know, put in a major chord where you might expect it to be a minor chord. And that's just a little extra tip I want to just show you. Let's listen to it once more. All right, next thing I want to show you. This is something that I think I'm also explaining in the legacy lecture of 3 practical ways of approaching modulation that you should check out. But I'm just gonna, you know, go through here as well because repetition is key to learning, guys. So let's go back to, you know, C major for simplicity's sake. Another way to just modulate is not necessarily modulating to a neighboring key, but just modulating up or down, say, 2 semitones. So from C to D. And, you know, you have to be kind of careful with this because it might sound a little bit cliche if you don't use it with, you know, careful with it. But it can also, you know, really give your track a little bit of a lift. Say we have a theme that goes like, suddenly you can give that a little bit of a lift by just modulating 2 semitones up from C to D. And, you know, it's not the best melodic example, but you can do this with any kind of theme. And those kind of things. So that's a simple way to just, you know, really surprise a listener, lift your theme a little bit, and give it a little bit of a boost. And of course, you can also go more than a whole step. And that's going to sound even more abrupt and even more extreme, but it can also give some good results. So let's say that we want to go from, so say we want to start in C major, but we want to jump, instead of just a semitone, we go a whole minor third up to, oops. So what will that sound like? Well, let's say we play something random like this. Suddenly, any kind of direct jump like that, a direct modulation, is going to have a more extreme effect. And they all work differently. They all will give you different results, but I just want you to kind of experiment with these 2 types of modulations. So let's just recap this whole thing, right? First of all, we have modulations that go on the circle of fifth, which can be found by, you know, just either working with your melody note and saying, okay, what other chords do we have outside of my key that has this note in it? Usually that's going to be a key that's neighboring on the circle of fifths because they share a lot of the same notes. But if not, you can just look at the circle of fifths and think, all right, what's next to this one? And then modulate to that. That's going to be a smooth and seamless way to kind of lift your theme and piece a little bit. And then if you want something a bit more abrupt, you can do a direct modulation, which means you can just jump to a different key. Usually you would maybe jump a whole step up or maybe down if you want energy to go down a little bit. Or you can just jump to any random key But I would be careful with that because it might sound a little bit, out of place unless that's an extreme effect you're going for. But if you're going to do that, I would, try to stick to like a semitone up or a minor third up or maybe a major third up. If you're modulating to a fourth up, then you're effectively basically just modulating to the neighboring key because, it's a fifth down. So I hope that makes sense. I hope it's not too much information to take in. But I would recommend that you now write a little piece of melody or take one of your existing melodies and practice each type of modulation a few times. A direct modulation and also a modulation to a neighboring key. So that's all for now, guys. I'll see you guys later.